Good morning and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat. I don't know if it's too late, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to be that person. Happy New Year! I mean, New Year means different things to different people. So I'm hoping that 2023 has treated you so well and there's so much more great things for you to come. So today we're here straight off the bat, where on Thursdays we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us from YouTube, thank you so much. Don't forget to smash that like button and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. I'm your host, Pauline Joseph, and today we're discussing electronic check clearing and what you should know with Karen Tom Yew. Now, you may be thinking, what does this have to do with me? Trust me, when it comes to information, I think you're better off with it than without it. So stick around. We're here with Karen. She is the General Manager, Group Marketing and Communications of RBL, Republic Bank Limited. She has more than 20 years of managerial experience. So I feel like she's going to give us so much insight into the evolution of this discussion. She also holds honors from the University of London, an international MBA in finance, and a BSc management honors from the University of West Indies. She also enjoys all things carnival, and I want you guys to know that she is technically on holiday, but she has given us her time. So let's try and squeeze out as much information as possible for the next 52 minutes. What is the electronic check clearing?
Electronic check clearing is an industry-wide system that went live about a week and a half ago. It's been in train for quite some time, and really, very simply put, what it does is alter the way the banks share check information with each other. Historically, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, what would have happened? Pauline, you would have written a check. This check would have been presented at X Bank. X Bank would have then exchanged the physical check with whoever your bank is, whoever the check is drawn on. And that would have been the process, a physical exchange of checks. What is happening now? All of the the images are being captured electronically. The checks are being scanned, and during the course of the processing time, the banks are exchanging image files of the checks for further credit or debit to persons' accounts. That's it in a nutshell. It's really the replacement of a physical manual system with an automated electronic one.
So when it comes to just the behind the scenes of what happens or what would have happened before that is, I would have funds in my account. I would go to an transaction or commerce transaction. I would write my check. So what would happen for us who don't know what's going on in the back end of things? What usually happens?
What would have happened in the back end is you would write a check to me for $1 million, and I'd say thank you very much, Pauline.
Ooh, girl.
Then I would take that check and deposit it into my account at Republic Bank. Assuming you bank at another bank, what would then have to happen is the physical check that I have in my possession that I have deposited at Republic Bank now has to be, well, that's happening across the board, right? So all the checks that are processed in one given day, would in the past have been collected, scrutinized, sorted, disaggregated to each bank and then sent to each bank. So assuming your bank was Bank X, all of the checks that Republic Bank had to process on tonight for, let's say, use today as the example, that are specific to Bank X would have gone back to them the following day for them to then start doing the processing in terms of debiting your account or putting a hold or whatever as the case may be. So that's what would have happened.
And now it's shift over now, because that time frame, what would have happened would have taken how much time?
That the exchange happened overnight. And then what would have happened is your account would be impacted the following day. What's going to happen now is, because the banks are processing electronically, the time frame is faster because there's no need for a physical exchange of checks. So persons' accounts are going to be impacted. I wouldn't, definitely not real time, but in a shorter time frame. The intent, of course, is for us to hopefully get to the stage of it being real time. But I mean, we're way away from that, because what would have to happen is all of the checks in the system would have to be compliant. And as at now, not all of the checks in issue are compliant.
And I've experienced this in the past, and I've seen it sometimes on movies where somebody would write a check and be like, don't cash it till Friday. Yeah. How is that going to change that type of behavior?
Oh, no, it really wouldn't, because I mean, if you gave me the $1 million check and told me don't cash it to Friday, then remember the check still has to get into the system. So if I hold the check and nothing would change with that scenario, because that's a matter of me actually having the check in my possession and making a decision when to deposit the check, which this system isn't going to impact.
Okay, good to know, guys. You heard it here first. So when it comes to this process that you would have discussed in the past earlier, why is this clearing process being changed?
Well, I mean, the real benefits at this point will be the ability to have, so some background, right? Over the past maybe year and a half to 2 years, the banks in the system have been encouraging all of their customers who have checking accounts, to exchange their checks and change them to the I referenced something earlier, a compliant format check. These checks are laid out in a particular way, printed on a particular paper, and the real benefit of it is the ability to use the scanning capabilities to pick up fraudulent checks or errors in checks, etc., etc. So it's much more efficient. It's much quicker. So it really does protect all players in the market from things like bad like fraudulent checks in particular. So that's one benefit. I mean, you also now have once the system gets going and you have everything captured electronically, just like everything else, it's easier to then go back and no pun intended, and check on an item that may have been issued historically, because you will now have electronic files exchanged. So it will be easier for the bank banks to go back and look, a week back, 2 weeks back, a month back, and locate an item, as opposed to now with all the physical items. It's a more manual and tedious process, and it takes longer,
So I like this conversation about compliance, because since we've started this show, it's been almost 2 years now. I've learned a lot, because I'm also a customer, and at times we get frustrated. It's like, why you need to have all this information for? This is just too much is happening. But at the same time, you speak about fraud. So let's talk about this compliance conversation and why it's important to understand why all of these steps are needed.
Well, I mean, a large part, writing a check is intuitively, if you think of what the process involves, the process lends itself more to things going wrong than someone electronically transferring funds from one to another. I mean, at the end of the day, a checkbook can get lost, a check can be altered. Someone could do all sorts of things if they have access to a physical check. And even if they don't, and I said you issue a check to someone, they can alter it. There are many ways that someone who had bad intentions could negatively impact a a customer's account and have access and do all sorts of things in the check writing process. So the importance of having these checks recertified and issued in accordance with the Canadian Payments Association standard, which is an international gold standard for security features on checks, does goes a long way to help mitigate and minimize that.
I like the fact that you brought up the Canadian Payment Association standards, and I want you to elaborate a little bit more on, what exactly that is and how that aligns with this discussion around electronic check clearing.
Okay, sure. So the Canadian Payments Association, like I said, it's the international benchmark for check security. There are several features that people who issue checks would have realized would have changed in the look, feel, layout of your checks over the past 18 months. So they need to be certain sizes. They need to have certain quality paper, which is not easily replicatable. The formats are standardized, date format. The site, like I said, there's information on the back of checks printed now that wasn't there previously. So when you're scanning the check, everything is captured. And that's right. I mean, the rest of it is pretty technical in terms of how the checks are laid out, but suffice it to say, there's a standard format. So everyone in the industry's checks will look the same, which allows for easier detection of outliers, right? Of anyone attempting to access someone's check and tamper with it or adjust it or even worse.
So can we talk a little bit about this idea of what's required on the checks? Because you mentioned the date, and I automatically think about how Americans write their dates and how we write our dates, and just the sort of standardization of what it means to write a check for somebody who may be looking at actually getting their first checking account. What should they be mindful of when it comes to writing a check?
Well, now the good thing is, because of how the checks are designed, there's no ambiguity. I mean, yes, as a rule in the Caribbean, we do day, month, year, and the American standard is the reverse, right? But it's actually spelled out on the check. If you look at how much, I wish I had a check to show you. There are 2 D's at the first 2 dots, so you know it has to be day. Then there are 2 M's, so you kind of, it guides you to not make those kind of errors, and it guides you to a place of standardization. So that's one thing that people need to be mindful of. The second thing is, while it's unusual, it's not rare. People would write checks in red ink or pink ink or green ink. The system will reject a check that isn't written up in black or blue ink. And at the end of the day, it's all about making the checks as clear as possible, so that a reader can pick it up and scan it easily. So those are the 2 main things I think customers who are writing checks need to be minded of. But again, the checks themselves are laid out in a way that very clearly and easily guide anyone writing them onto how to write it out, how to fill it out, and what goes where.
All right. I think that is some very valuable information when it comes to both commercial and regular smuggler clients like me. And I think those are conversations that within an office, especially if you have an organization, these are the types of information you need to share amongst your team, because if you have more than one person writing a check, obviously you need to be mindful of the color of the ink. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to have a discussion about the impact that this electronic system is going to have for you. So we'll be right back with Karen. And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are here really discussing financial literacy and education. You know the drill. If you're joining us for the first time on Facebook, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing what you should know about electronic cheque clearing. We are here with Karen, and she is from RBL, the General Manager of Group Marketing and Communications. And I mean, for a lot of folks, they're like, what is this all about? Because a lot of us are online, but there's a lot of commercial customers who are definitely using checks, and this is the type of information I think your business should be chiming in on. We have a question from Philip. I want to touch on the question right now. As we speak about electronic alternatives, are we really there as it pertains to faster processing times by all commercial banks? Now, I know Karen is here under Republic Bank. She cannot speak on behalf of all banks, but I'm sure she can contribute to this discussion. So you want to chime in there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for your question. I mean, I'm seeing, I want to answer it in two ways. One is with specific reference to electronic alternatives. And I will say that from Republic Bank's perspective, use of our electronic alternatives, not checks, internet banking, mobile banking, does lend itself to almost real-time payment between accounts, whether it be person to person or person to business or business to business. So I hope that answers the first part. As it relates to this discussion about the electronic cheque clearing system that went into effect, we haven't been able to eke out the benefit of faster processing time because not all checks in the system are compliant. And again, that would require discussions with the regulator to adjust time frames for holding checks, etc., etc. So the first phase is us having close to 100% of checks circulating in the system become compliant, and then we can take it in phases in terms of shortening the processing time. But certainly, as an electronic alternative, online payments, mobile banking payments are real time, and more importantly, from a customer perspective, can be done at your convenience whenever.
So we're going to have another question from Philip asking, what about foreign checks? Is it that these are already compliant with this electronic system? Great question.
That's a very good question. At this point, I don't want to answer out of turn, but I have not, in all of the deliberations thus far, and again, it would have been happening across the industry and collaboratively across all of the banks and with central bank, the issue of foreign checks has not featured at all. So I would think at this point, no, there would be no change with how the banks process foreign checks. But perhaps we could, I don't know, maybe we can, if you can email the question or send it to the link, we could check and get back to you on that one.
So Lawrence wants to know, is electronic cheque clearing the same as ACH?
They're not the same, but they are like hand and glove. So the electronic cheque clearing system really speaks about the exchange of the checks, and the ACH, the automated clearinghouse system, is the back-end system that facilitates the crediting and debiting between the banks. So they work together, but they're not the same. They're different systems.
So is this the same system for online banking?
No, it's not. It's different. Each bank would have its own proprietary online banking system. So no, it isn't. And those systems would, of course, interface with your, like, again, a Republic Bank would interface with your Republic Bank account, but it would use the ACH system would be part of that entire system, because remember, you can transfer from a Republic Bank to another bank, and it would be done via that same ACH system.
It is exciting to see a development in the back-end systems, which will in the near future provide efficiencies in customers getting funds in their accounts when using checks. Thank you so much for joining our live session today, Nicolana. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are doing so from LinkedIn, just click that follow button. Trust me, you'll be fine. It'll be great because you'll be continuing seeing content about how to help you manage your money. So today we're discussing what you should know about electronic check clearing with Karen. As an employer, do I have to change the checks I have now, or can I wait for the batch I have to finish? Great question.
Yeah, that's a good question, Lawrence. I mean, I don't know who you bank with, and every bank is taking a different approach. We at Republic are encouraging customers to come and exchange the checks at no cost as early as possible. We've been communicating with our customers over the last year and a half through different channels. Simply because the sooner we get everyone in the country on the same platform of checks, we'll be able to get more benefits from the platform and the efficiencies. What's happening since we've gone live roughly 2 weeks ago is we're having to run a hybrid system, right? So we're scanning all, but some still have to be exchanged. We're having a high level of rejects depending on checks being non-compliant, etc. Right? So it really is ideal for you to go into your bank and exchange your checks. I mean, for the time being, the time will come when collaboratively the Bankers Association, in conjunction with Central Bank, will say, listen, as at X date, the old style checks will no longer be valid and will not be accepted. We're not there yet. Of course, and the industry will be given ample notice of that type of change, but the time will come. So to your question, I don't know how often you write checks. I don't know how many checks you issue at any point in time, but it is in your interest to approach your bank to change checks out as soon as you can.
Fraud, how will this new system mitigate against fraud?
Yeah, that's a good question. The check themselves in the new format is a mitigant against fraud. The way the checks are laid out, the way the checks the paper that the checks are used, the security features that are built into the new format checks in and of themselves are mitigants against fraud. And the fact that the checks are being run through a scanner that is trained to look for the security features, etc., which will automatically pick up or have a higher chance of picking up checks that are not compliant and don't have the security features. So that is the main approach.
Sure that we have all of the questions answered. We have some comments, but I don't think they're questions. Curtis basically believes that all checks must go. Everybody's not like you.
If this is the Curtis Mohammed I know from Republic Bank, thank you, Curtis, and we know your views clearly.
Yeah, Curtis, not everyone's the same, okay? Some people want to keep writing, right? So, but yes, as you mentioned earlier, it depends on the customer needs and what they want. So I think on that note, Karen, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to give you back your vacation time. So goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great, safe week. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for Karen to join us today and sharing insight into electronic cheque clearing. Make sure to sign up to be notified about our next live show by the link in the comments, and basically everything we discussed can be viewed in our comment section. Be sure to follow our page on Facebook so you don't miss a single live show. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.